Erica Rivers had always been a woman of discipline and purpose. As a former Special Forces operative turned survival training instructor, she carried an air of quiet confidence that spoke of someone who had been through battles both literal and metaphorical. Her life had taught her to prepare for the unexpected, to read her environment like a book, and to trust her instincts without hesitation. Today, however, was meant to be different, a rare opportunity for her to spend quality time with her 9-year-old son, Jordan. The boy had inherited her sharp mind and adventurous spirit, and Erica saw it as her duty to nurture these traits, preparing him for a world that didn't always play fair. The sun was high in the sky as the two of them ventured into the old Maplewood Park, a sprawling forested area on the outskirts of their small town. Once a bustling recreational spot, the park had fallen into neglect over the years, its overgrown paths and crumbling picnic tables a testament to time's passage. Few people visited anymore, deterred by rumors of unsavory characters lurking in its shadows. But Erica wasn't the type to be scared off by whispers. To her, the park wasn't a place to avoid, it was a training ground where she could teach Jordan the basics of navigation, problem-solving, and resilience. They walked together along the winding trails, the crunch of leaves underfoot the only sound accompanying their conversation. Erica had packed a small backpack with essentials: water, snacks, a compass, and a first aid kit. Jordan carried his own smaller pack, determined to mirror his mother's self-sufficiency. He was a curious child, always asking questions and eager to learn, and today was no different. "Mum," he asked, his voice bright with curiosity, "why does no one come here anymore? It's so cool." Erica smiled, glancing down at him. "People are afraid of what they don't understand, Jordan. They let fear control them instead of facing it head-on. But fear's just another problem to solve." Jordan nodded thoughtfully, processing her words as they continued deeper into the park. The trees grew denser here, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns on the ground. Erica's eyes scanned their surroundings instinctively, noting the signs of wildlife and the faint remnants of human activity: a broken bench here, a discarded soda can there. Her mind catalogued everything, a habit she couldn't shake even on a day meant for relaxation. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. As they reached a small clearing, Erica decided it was a good spot to set up a temporary base. She pulled out the compass and began explaining its use to Jordan, who listened intently, his face scrunched in concentration. "Always orient yourself to the north first," she said, demonstrating. "Then you can figure out where you need to go, even if everything else looks the same." Jordan practiced with her guidance, his excitement growing as he started to grasp the concept. They laughed together as he stumbled over the terminology, the sound of their joy filling the otherwise quiet woods. But even as she enjoyed the moment, Erica felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It was nothing overt, just a faint prickling at the back of her neck, the kind of feeling that years of experience had taught her not to ignore. Her laughter faded slightly as she stood, scanning the edges of the clearing with an intensity that didn't match the light-hearted moment. Jordan noticed her change in demeanor and frowned. "What's wrong, Mum?" he asked, his young voice tinged with concern. Erica forced a reassuring smile. "Nothing, buddy. Just keeping an eye out. Always good to stay aware of your surroundings." Jordan accepted her answer and went back to fiddling with the compass, but Erica remained on edge. She didn't want to alarm him unnecessarily, but something felt off. The woods were too quiet now, the usual sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves conspicuously absent. And then there were the tire tracks she'd spotted earlier on the trail, a recent addition, judging by the lack of debris in the grooves. They were wide and deep, likely from motorcycles, and they didn't belong in a place like this. Her instincts told her to leave. But she didn't want to panic Jordan or cut their day short without concrete reason. Instead, she decided to stay alert, keeping him close while subtly positioning herself to watch the main paths leading into the clearing. If there was trouble, she would see it coming first. Her hand brushed the knife strapped to her belt, a habit from her days in the field. It was a comforting weight, a reminder that she was never truly unarmed. The moment passed without incident, and Erica tried to shake the unease as they continued their activities. She taught Jordan how to build a small shelter using fallen branches and leaves, guiding his hands as he worked. They played a quick game of hide and seek, with Jordan giggling as he tried to outsmart his mother's keen senses. For a while it seemed her earlier worries were unfounded, a product of her overactive caution. But then the sound came, a low, distant rumble that vibrated through the ground. Erica froze, her eyes snapping to Jordan, who looked up at her in confusion. "What's that?" he asked. The rumble grew louder, resolving into the unmistakable roar of engines. Motorcycles. More than one. Erica's mind raced as she grabbed Jordan's hand, pulling him toward the edge of the clearing. "Stay close to me," she said, her voice low and firm. "No matter what happens, you don't let go of my hand." They barely made it to the tree line when the first bike burst into view, followed by 4 others. The riders were a motley crew of leather-clad men, their faces obscured by helmets and dark sunglasses. They spread out as they entered the clearing, their engines growling like predators on the hunt. Erica's grip on Jordan tightened as she assessed the situation. These weren't casual adventurers enjoying a ride through the woods. They were deliberate, their movements calculated, and they had seen her. The leader, a towering man with a menacing presence, killed his engine and dismounted, striding toward them with a swagger that screamed confidence. He pulled off his helmet, revealing a face lined with arrogance and cruelty. Well, he drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "What do we have here?" "A little family picnic," his companions chuckled, their laughter cold and devoid of humor. Erica stepped forward slightly, shielding Jordan with her body. Her voice was calm but firm as she addressed the man. "We're just passing through. No trouble here," the leader smirked, his eyes raking over her with a predatory gleam. "Trouble? Who said anything about trouble? We're just being friendly. Ain't that right, boys?" The others laughed again, the sound grating on Erica's nerves. She knew what this was. It wasn't random. These men had followed them, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now they were here, their intentions as clear as the smirks on their faces. Erica's mind sharpened, her body tensing in readiness. She didn't know what they wanted, but she wasn't about to let them take it. Not without a fight. The air in the clearing grew heavy, the tension palpable, as the leader of the bikers, a man who introduced himself with an exaggerated smirk as Travis, slowly circled Erica and Jordan. His towering frame, clad in a battered leather jacket adorned with patches and symbols, radiated an unsettling mixture of confidence and malice. The other bikers, 4 in total, remained astride their motorcycles, their engines idling like growling beasts ready to spring into action. Each of them had the same aura of dangerous boredom, men seeking entertainment at the expense of anyone unfortunate enough to cross their path. Erica instinctively shifted her stance, subtly placing her body between Travis and Jordan, her hand resting protectively on her son's shoulder. "What's the matter, sweetheart?" Travis drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. His eyes flickered to Jordan, and the smirk on his face widened into a grin that sent a shiver down Erica's spine. "You look a little nervous. We don't bite, unless you give us a reason." His companions laughed, a guttural, hollow sound that seemed to bounce off the trees surrounding the clearing. Erica maintained her composure, her expression calm but her eyes scanning the bikers, calculating. Her military training kicked in, assessing their stances, their movements, and the potential for weapons concealed in their jackets or saddlebags. These weren't just men looking to intimidate, their calculated positioning in the way they eyed her, and Jordan spoke of something darker, something predatory. She spoke evenly, her voice firm. "We're just passing through. There's no need for trouble. We'll be on our way." Travis tilted his head, feigning consideration. Passing through her. Funny place for a little mummy and son outing. He gestured broadly to the deserted park, the overgrown paths and rusting picnic tables. Doesn't exactly scream family fun day, does it? He took a deliberate step closer, his boots crunching on the dry leaves. Maybe you got lost. Or maybe he let the words hang in the air, the implication clear but unspoken. Jordan tightened his grip on Erica's hand, his young eyes wide with a mix of confusion and fear. He looked up at her, searching for reassurance, and she squeezed his hand gently, her expression softening for just a moment. "It's okay, buddy," she murmured, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Stay close to me." Travis watched the exchange with amusement, his grin widening. "Ain't that sweet? Look at you, being all protective. But you see, I think you're missing the point here." He stopped his slow circling, standing squarely in front of her now, his presence looming. "You don't get to decide when this little party's over. That's up to us." One of the other bikers, a wiry man with a scruffy beard and a toothpick clenched between his teeth, spoke up from his bike. "Maybe they got something worth our time, Travis. Looks like they're packed for a trip." His eyes darted to Erica's backpack, then to the smaller one slung over Jordan's shoulders. "Kids always got the best snacks, don't they?" The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel, a pack of wolves scenting blood. Travis turned to his companion, shaking his head with mock disappointment. "Snacks? Simon, man. Think bigger." He looked back at Erica, his eyes narrowing. "How about it, sweetheart? You carrying anything valuable? Cash, jewelry. Anything to make this little visit worth our while?" Erica felt a surge of anger bubbling beneath her calm exterior, but she forced it down, keeping her voice steady. "We don't have anything you want. Just let us go, and we'll forget this ever happened." Travis barked a laugh, his head tilting back as if she'd told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "Forget? Oh, honey, I think you've got the wrong idea. We're just getting started." He turned abruptly, his hand shooting out to snatch Jordan's backpack. The boy gasped in surprise, his grip on the straps tightening instinctively, but Travis yanked it away with ease, spilling its contents onto the ground. "Hey," Jordan protested, his voice trembling but defiant. He moved as if to retrieve his belongings, but Erica's arm shot out, stopping him. Her eyes locked on Travis, her voice low and dangerous. "That's enough." The shift in her tone caught Travis off guard, and for a brief moment the smirk faltered. But it returned quickly, now tinged with something darker. "Enough," he repeated, stepping closer. "Lady, you don't get to tell me what's enough." Erica could feel the situation escalating, the fragile thread of control slipping further with each passing second. She knew she had to de-escalate, to protect Jordan, but she also knew men like Travis didn't back down easily. Her mind raced, searching for an opening, a way to turn the odds in her favor. She took a small step back, her movements calculated, her hand brushing against the handle of the knife concealed at her hip. Not yet. Timing was everything. Travis leaned down, picking up one of Jordan's spilled items, a small toy airplane, its paint chipped from years of use. He turned it over in his hands, mockingly inspecting it. "Cute," he said, holding it up for his friends to see. "This yours, kid?" He dangled it in front of Jordan, who glared at him but didn't respond. "What do you say we make a trade? Your little plane for?" Before he could finish, Erica stepped forward, her voice cutting through his words like a blade. Put it down, now. The force behind her command froze Travis for a split second, the weight of her authority cutting through the bravado. But his pride, bolstered by the presence of his gang, quickly reasserted itself. He tossed the toy into the dirt, his smirk twisting into a sneer. Or what? Erica's patience snapped. In one fluid motion, she stepped forward and snatched the toy from the ground, her movements sharp and precise. She straightened, meeting Travis's gaze with a steely resolve that made his sneer falter. "Or you'll regret it," she said evenly, her voice low but carrying a promise that made the air around them grow colder. The other bikers stirred, sensing the shift in dynamics. One of them, a younger man with a nervous energy, muttered, "Travis, maybe we should," but he was silenced by a sharp glare from the leader. Travis took another step forward, his chest nearly brushing against Erica's. "You got a lot of guts, sweetheart. Let's see how far that gets you." His hand darted out, aiming to grab her arm, but Erica was faster. She sidestepped smoothly, her hand shooting up to grip his wrist in a vice-like hold. Travis let out a surprised grunt, his bravado slipping as she twisted his arm with practiced ease, forcing him off balance. The clearing erupted into chaos. The other bikers dismounted, their laughter replaced by shouts of alarm and anger as Travis stumbled back, clutching his arm. Erica's stance shifted, her body poised for action, her eyes locking onto the group like a predator sizing up its prey. "Leave, now," she commanded, her voice sharp and unyielding. But Travis, his pride wounded, wasn't ready to back down. "Get her," he barked, and the bikers surged forward as one. The confrontation had begun. The chaos in the clearing erupted in an instant as Travis's barked command spurred his gang into action. The other bikers dismounted their motorcycles, their movements fueled by a mix of arrogance and rage. Erica's heart raced, but her focus remained razor-sharp. Years of training surged through her veins, her body reacting before her mind fully registered the threat. She glanced at Jordan, who stood frozen, his wide eyes locked on the advancing men. "Jordan, get behind that tree," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the shouts and revving engines. "Now." Jordan hesitated for a fraction of a second before obeying, scrambling to the nearest tree and pressing his back against its rough bark. Erica shifted her stance, placing herself between her son and the oncoming bikers. Her mind calculated rapidly 5 men, all larger than her, possibly armed, and all clearly used to intimidation as their primary weapon. But intimidation didn't work on her. She wasn't afraid of their size or their numbers. Her fear was for Jordan, and that fear became her fuel. The first biker to reach her was the wiry one with the scruffy beard who had taunted her earlier. He lunged, his hands reaching for her shoulders, but Erica was faster. She ducked under his grasp and drove her elbow into his ribs with a sharp twist of her torso. The force of the blow sent him stumbling to the side, clutching his side and gasping for air. Erica didn't wait for him to recover. She spun on her heel, delivering a precise kick to the back of his knee, sending him crashing to the ground. Before she could catch her breath, another biker was upon her, this one stockier, and moving with a brute force that matched his build. He swung a heavy fist at her, but she sidestepped, the punch whistling past her ear. Using his momentum against him, she grabbed his outstretched arm and pivoted, twisting his wrist until he roared in pain. She followed up with a knee to his stomach, doubling him over. Her movements were fluid, efficient, every strike and hold calculated to neutralize without wasting energy. The third biker, younger and faster than the others, attempted to tackle her from behind. Erica caught his reflection in the glint of a broken bottle, lying on the ground, and dropped to a crouch just as his arms reached for her. His momentum carried him forward, and he tripped over her, crashing into the dirt face first. Erica used the opportunity to grab a thick branch from the ground, holding it like a makeshift staff as she rose to her feet. Travis, watching the chaos unfold, clenched his fists in frustration. "What the hell are you idiots doing?" he bellowed, his voice cutting through the scuffle. He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he locked onto Erica. "You think you're tough, lady? Let's see how you handle me." He reached behind his back, pulling out a length of chain that clinked ominously as he let it uncoil in his hands. The sight of the weapon drew a collective intake of breath from the other bikers, who staggered back, licking their wounds but unwilling to retreat just yet. Erica's grip tightened on the branch in her hand. The chain was a game changer. It gave Travis reach and leverage she couldn't match with her makeshift weapon. She adjusted her stance, her eyes tracking the rhythm of the chain as he swung it experimentally, the metal links whistling through the air. "You should have stayed down," Travis growled, his voice low and menacing. "Now you're gonna regret it." He swung the chain in a wide arc, aiming for her torso. Erica stepped back just in time, the chain slicing through the air inches from her chest. Before he could recover, she surged forward, striking at his outstretched arm with the branch. The impact made him grunt, but he held onto the chain, swinging it again with renewed ferocity. This time the end of the chain caught the branch, yanking it from her hands and sending it spinning to the ground. Erica didn't flinch. As Travis drew the chain back for another swing, she darted forward, closing the distance between them. Her hands shot up, grabbing the chain just below his grip and twisting it with all her strength. Travis, caught off guard by her sudden move, stumbled, and Erica took advantage of his imbalance. She drove her knee into his thigh, forcing him to release his hold on the chain. It fell to the ground with a heavy thud, and she kicked it out of reach, sending it skittering across the dirt. Travis roared in frustration and lunged at her with his bare hands, his size and strength making him a formidable opponent even without the chain. He managed to grab her by the arm, his grip like a vise, and swung her toward the nearest tree. Erica's shoulder slammed into the trunk, pain radiating down her arm, but she gritted her teeth and fought through it. She twisted in his grip, bringing her elbow up to strike him square in the jaw. The blow made his head snap back, and his grip loosened just enough for her to break free. The other bikers, emboldened by Travis's attack, began to close in again, but Erica wasn't done yet. She darted to the side, grabbing a handful of dirt and leaves from the ground and flinging it at the nearest biker's face. He cried out, clawing at his eyes as she delivered a swift kick to his shin, dropping him to his knees. Another biker tried to grab her from behind, but she spun and struck him with a palm heel to the chest, forcing him to stagger backward. Through it all, Erica kept Jordan in the corner of her vision, making sure he was safe. The boy watched from behind the tree, his face pale but his eyes locked on her with a mixture of fear and awe. "Stay there," she called to him, her voice firm but reassuring. "I've got this." Travis, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, glared at her with pure hatred. "You're gonna pay for that," he snarled, wiping his face with the back of his hand. He reached for a knife strapped to his belt, the blade gleaming menacingly as he drew it. The sight made Erica's stomach twist, but she didn't let the fear show. She widened her stance, her hands curling into fists. "Come on," then she said, her voice steady. "Let's see what you've got." The remaining bikers hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. The woman in front of them wasn't breaking, if anything. She seemed more determined with each passing second. Travis's bravado was the only thing keeping them from retreating, but even he was starting to falter, the confidence in his movements giving way to frustration and desperation. He lunged at her with the knife, slashing in a wild arc, but Erica sidestepped, her movements fluid and controlled. She grabbed his wrist, twisting it sharply, and the knife clattered to the ground. Before he could react, she delivered a powerful strike to his throat with the edge of her hand, forcing him to stumble back, choking and gasping for air. The silence that followed was deafening. Travis fell to his knees, clutching his throat, while the other bikers stood frozen, their confidence shattered. Erica straightened, her chest heaving as she surveyed the scene. "Get out of here," she said, her voice cold and unyielding. "Now." The bikers hesitated for a moment, but when Travis didn't get up, they scrambled for their motorcycles, their bravado dissolving into panic. One by one, they revved their engines and sped off, leaving their leader behind. Erica stepped back, letting them go, her focus shifting to Jordan, who emerged cautiously from behind the tree. She knelt down, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice softening. Jordan nodded, his small arms wrapping around her. "Mum, you're amazing," he whispered, his voice trembling. Erica closed her eyes, holding him close as the adrenaline slowly ebbed away. "I told you," she said quietly. "We don't let fear win." As the roar of the motorcycles faded into the distance, the clearing fell into an uneasy silence. The wreckage of the confrontation was everywhere: upturned dirt, scuffed leaves, and the faint impression of chaos lingering in the air. Erica remained standing, her chest heaving as she worked to steady her breathing. Her mind, however, refused to quiet. Travis was still on his knees, coughing and gasping for air, his pride as battered as his body. The man who had moments ago been a snarling predator was now reduced to a crumpled shadow of himself, but Erica knew better than to assume the danger was gone. She couldn't afford to lower her guard. Mom Jordan's small voice broke the silence, drawing Erica's attention. He had crept out from behind the tree, his wide eyes darting nervously between her and Travis. "Is it over?" he asked, clutching his backpack straps with trembling hands. Erica turned to him, softening her expression as she knelt down to his level. She placed her hands on his shoulders, grounding both him and herself. "For now," she said, her voice steady but tinged with the edge of caution. "But we're not out of the woods yet." "Literally." Jordan nodded, though his fear was evident. Erica could see the tension in his body, the way his hands fidgeted. She hated that he had been forced to witness something so violent, but there had been no other choice. Her heart ached to comfort him, to wrap him in safety and tell him everything would be okay, but she couldn't lie to him. Not here, not now. They had to stay vigilant. Behind her, Travis let out a guttural groan, shifting on the ground as he tried to pull himself upright. Erica's head snapped around, her posture immediately tensing. She rose to her feet in one fluid motion, her eyes narrowing as she watched him. "Don't move," she warned, her tone low and commanding. Travis froze mid-motion, his bloodied lips curling into a bitter sneer. "You think you've won, don't you?" he rasped, his voice hoarse, but still carrying the remnants of defiance. "You've got no idea what's coming." Erica stepped closer, her boots crunching on the dirt. She loomed over him, her presence an undeniable force of authority. "You've already lost," she said coldly. "And if you're smart, you'll stay down." Travis chuckled darkly, though the sound came out strained and broken. "Smart," he spat, wiping the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand. "You think you've got the upper hand just because you took down a few of my guys? You don't know who you're messing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Erica shot back. Her eyes flicked to the knife still lying on the ground, the blade glinting in the dappled sunlight. She kicked it farther away with a calculated motion, ensuring it was out of reach. A bully who hides behind numbers and intimidation. "But now your gang's gone, and you're nothing without them." A word struck a nerve. Travis's face contorted with rage, and for a moment, Erica thought he might lunge at her again. But instead, he simply glared at her, his jaw clenched so tightly it seemed his teeth might crack. "This isn't over," he growled. "You're making a big mistake." Noted Erica replied dryly, her eyes never leaving him. She knew his type men who thrived on control, who couldn't stand the thought of being bested, especially by someone they deemed weaker. He was dangerous, but his anger also made him predictable. She could use that to her advantage. She turned her back on him, a calculated move to show her lack of fear, though she remained hyper-aware of his presence. Her focus shifted to Jordan, who was watching the interaction with a mixture of awe and anxiety. "We need to move," she said firmly, adjusting the straps of her backpack. "Now." Jordan hesitated, his gaze flickering to Travis. "What about him?" he asked, his voice small. Erica's jaw tightened. "He'll stay where he is," she said. Though the unspoken truth lingered between them, she couldn't guarantee that. They were vulnerable as long as Travis was alive and angry, but Erica wasn't willing to take a life unless absolutely necessary. She had seen enough violence in her years of service to know it left scars on more than just the body. She reached for Jordan's hand, pulling him gently but insistently toward the edge of the clearing. Her instincts told her to put as much distance as possible between them and the scene of the fight. They re-entered the forest, the dense trees closing around them like a protective cocoon. Erica's sharp eyes scanned their surroundings, searching for any sign of the other bikers. She knew they hadn't gone far. Men like them didn't take humiliation lightly, and they would regroup, looking for a chance to strike back. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves conspicuously absent. Erica's grip on Jordan's hand tightened as they moved deeper into the woods, her senses on high alert. She could feel his small fingers trembling against hers, and she squeezed gently, hoping to convey some measure of reassurance. "Are they going to come after us?" Jordan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe," Erica admitted. She saw no point in sugarcoating the truth, but if they do, we'll be ready. Jordan nodded, his fear giving way to a flicker of determination. Erica felt a surge of pride in her son. He was stronger than he realized, and she would do everything in her power to protect that strength. As they navigated the uneven terrain, Erica's mind raced with possibilities. The bikers had the advantage of speed and numbers, but she knew the forest better than they did. She had trained in environments far more hostile than this, and every rock, tree, and stream was a potential ally. Her survival training came flooding back: how to set traps, how to use the terrain to create bottlenecks, how to turn the natural world into a weapon. She began mentally mapping out their next steps, calculating the best way to lead Jordan to safety while staying one step ahead of their pursuers. They came upon a shallow stream, its clear water trickling over smooth stones. Erica crouched down, motioning for Jordan to do the same. "We're going to follow this for a bit," she explained quietly. "It'll mask our tracks." Jordan nodded, his trust in her unwavering. He mimicked her movements as they waded into the cool water, the current tugging gently at their feet. Erica kept her steps light and deliberate, moving downstream while scanning the surrounding trees for any sign of movement. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the tension hanging thick in the air. After several minutes, they came to a bend in the stream where the water pooled into a small, quiet eddy. Erica paused, crouching low behind a cluster of rocks. She motioned for Jordan to stay quiet, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Her ears strained for any sound out of place: a snapping twig, the distant hum of engines, but all she heard was the steady burble of the stream. And then, faintly, it came: the low, guttural rumble of motorcycles in the distance. Erica's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. She turned to Jordan, her expression serious. "Stay here," she whispered. "Don't move until I come back." Jordan's eyes widened in protest, but he nodded, trusting her judgment. Erica crept toward the source of the noise, her movements as silent as the shadows cast by the trees. She reached a small rise that overlooked a narrow trail, and there they were, the remaining bikers, moving in a loose formation as they scanned the woods. She recognized the younger one, the nervous energy in his movements betraying his unease. He was clearly out of his depth, glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting something to jump out at him. The others were more composed, their eyes sharp and predatory. They were searching for her, and Erica knew it was only a matter of time before they picked up her trail. Her mind raced, formulating a plan. She couldn't lead them back to Jordan, but she also couldn't risk a direct confrontation with all of them at once. She needed to divide them, to sow confusion and fear. Her gaze fell on a cluster of loose rocks at the edge of the rise, and an idea began to take shape. With practiced precision, she shifted one of the larger rocks, sending it tumbling down the slope. The sound echoed through the forest, drawing the bikers' attention. "Over there," one of them shouted, and they veered off the trail, splitting into smaller groups as they pursued the noise. Erica melted back into the shadows, a ghost in the trees. The hunt was on, but this time she wasn't the prey. Erica moved like a shadow through the forest, her breath steady and measured as she trailed the bikers from a safe distance. The group had splintered, exactly as she had hoped, their overconfidence and lack of cohesion working in her favor. Their motorcycles, once an advantage, were now a hindrance in the dense woods. The terrain was uneven, riddled with roots and rocks that made maneuvering difficult. The low rumble of their engines, meant to intimidate, only served to broadcast their location. Erica's mind raced, calculating her next move as she carefully chose her steps to avoid detection. She couldn't let her focus waver, not with Jordan waiting for her, hidden and vulnerable. The group ahead consisted of 3 bikers, their frustration evident in the harsh tones of their voices. They had dismounted and were now moving on foot, hacking at the underbrush with knives and sticks as they searched for her. Their leader for this splinter group was a wiry man with a shaved head and a perpetual sneer. Erica had noticed his jumpy demeanor earlier. He was a man who relied on others to back him up, and now, separated from the larger group, his bravado seemed thinner, stretched by the tension in the air. "I'm telling you, she couldn't have gotten far," the wiry man muttered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. His companions, both larger and slower, exchanged skeptical glances. "This is a waste of time," one of them grumbled, his voice heavy with irritation. "She's just some lady. How hard can it be to catch her?" Erica allowed herself the smallest hint of a grim smile as she crouched behind a fallen log, listening to their bickering. Their disorganization was her weapon. She waited until they moved a little farther ahead, then silently crept along a parallel path, positioning herself ahead of them. Her eyes scanned the forest floor, looking for anything she could use. A jagged branch caught her attention, its splintered end sharp enough to serve as a makeshift spear. She picked it up and tested its weight, the solid heft reassuring in her hands. She didn't plan to engage them directly, unless absolutely necessary. Her goal was to slow them down, to frustrate and exhaust them until they gave up the chase. But if it came to a fight, she would be ready. The bikers reached a narrow section of the trail where the underbrush thickened, forcing them to move in single file. Erica saw her opportunity. She slipped through the trees, positioning herself just ahead of them, and pulled a vine from a nearby tree. Its tough, fibrous strands were strong enough to serve her purpose. Quickly and quietly, she tied the vine between 2 low-hanging branches, creating a tripwire that was nearly invisible in the dappled light filtering through the canopy. She retreated to a safe distance, hiding behind a cluster of ferns as she watched the bikers approach. The wiry man was in the lead, his knife slicing at the foliage as he muttered under his breath. He didn't see the vine until it was too late. His foot caught on the makeshift tripwire, and he went sprawling forward with a startled yelp, his knife flying from his hand. The man behind him stumbled over his prone form, and both of them crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs and curses. The third biker managed to stop in time, but his frustration boiled over. "What the hell are you doing?" he snapped, hauling the wiry man to his feet. "It's a damn jungle out here," the wiry man retorted, brushing dirt from his clothes. "How was I supposed to see that?" From her hiding spot, Erica allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The tripwire hadn't done any real damage, but it had achieved its purpose, sowing chaos and eroding their confidence. She slipped away before they could regain their composure, moving deeper into the woods as she planned her next move. The forest was her ally, its twists and turns offering countless opportunities to outmaneuver her pursuers. She came across a narrow ravine, its sides steep and covered in loose gravel. A fallen tree bridged the gap, its surface slick with moss. Erica paused, considering her options. She could cross the ravine and use the natural barrier to her advantage, but it was risky. The bikers were closing in, their shouts growing louder as they regrouped. Erica decided to risk it. She tested the tree with her weight, then quickly but carefully made her way across, her arms outstretched for balance. The ravine was deeper than she had initially thought, and the drop below was unforgiving. Her boots slipped on the moss once, but she caught herself, her pulse pounding as she reached the other side. She turned back just in time to see the bikers arrive at the edge of the ravine. "There she is," one of them shouted, pointing at her. The wiry man sneered. "She's trapped now. Let's go after her." They started across the log, but Erica was ready. She picked up a large rock from the ground and hurled it at the tree, aiming for the weakest point in its trunk. The impact wasn't enough to break the tree completely, but it dislodged several chunks of rotting wood, making the surface even more unstable. The first biker on the log hesitated, his confidence faltering as the tree creaked ominously beneath his weight. "Come on, you idiot," the wiry man barked, shoving the hesitant biker forward. But it was a mistake. The combined weight of two men was too much for the weakened tree. With a loud crack, the log gave way, sending them tumbling into the ravine. Their screams echoed through the forest, followed by the dull thud of their landing. Erica didn't wait to see if they were injured. She turned and ran, her muscles burning as she pushed herself to keep moving. She knew the fall wouldn't kill them, but it would take them time to climb out, time she could use to put more distance between them. The third biker, the largest of the group, had stayed behind, unwilling to risk the crossing. He shouted angrily after her, but his voice faded as she disappeared into the trees. Her lungs burned as she slowed to a jog, her ears straining for any sign of pursuit. The forest around her was still, the chaos of the past few minutes replaced by an eerie quiet. She allowed herself a moment to catch her breath, leaning against a tree as she assessed her situation. Two bikers were out of commission for the moment, but the others would be closing in. She couldn't afford to rest for long. Her thoughts turned to Jordan, and a pang of worry tightened her chest. She had left him hidden near the stream, trusting that he would stay put, but the thought of him alone and vulnerable gnawed at her. She had to get back to him. But she couldn't lead the bikers to his hiding place. She needed to finish this first. The sound of an engine roaring to life jolted her from her thoughts. One of the bikers had found a way to navigate the terrain, his motorcycle tearing through the underbrush as he closed in on her position. Erica clenched her jaw, gripping her makeshift spear as she prepared for the next confrontation. She wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The growl of the motorcycle reverberated through the forest, a jarring contrast to the quiet chaos of nature. Erica's muscles tensed as the sound drew closer, the unmistakable hum of an engine grinding against roots and rocks. She crouched low behind a thick tree, gripping her makeshift spear tightly in one hand, her other hand brushing against the knife at her hip. Every fiber of her being was attuned to the approaching threat. The biker was coming fast, his recklessness fueled by anger and a desperate need to reassert dominance. The flash of movement through the trees confirmed his position. It was the largest of the group, the one who had hesitated at the ravine. His heavy-set frame hunched over the handlebars, his face twisted in a mix of frustration and determination. Erica could see the beads of sweat on his brow, the way his knuckles whitened as he gripped the handles, his frustration clearly boiling over. The forest had turned into an enemy he couldn't conquer, and that humiliation only made him more dangerous. Erica's heart thudded in her chest as she calculated her next move. She couldn't let him pass, not with Jordan waiting further down the trail. She would have to stop him here and now. Her eyes scanned her surroundings, searching for anything she could use to create an advantage. The forest, once an ally of concealment, now felt like a stage for an inevitable confrontation. The biker barreled closer, the motorcycle tearing through a dense patch of bushes as if they were paper. Erica shifted, keeping low as she moved parallel to his path. The sound of the engine drowned out her footsteps, allowing her to close the distance unnoticed. She tightened her grip on the spear, feeling the coarse texture of the bark bite into her palm. Her muscles coiled like a spring, ready to strike. The biker slowed momentarily, the rough terrain forcing him to navigate carefully around a cluster of large rocks. Erica seized the opportunity. She darted from her hiding place, moving with the silent precision of a predator. The spear arsed through the air with practiced efficiency, its jagged tip slamming into the front wheel of the motorcycle. The impact sent the bike skidding sideways, the heavy machine toppling over as the biker was thrown from the seat. He landed hard, his body slamming into the ground with a sickening thud. The air rushed from his lungs in a choked gasp, and for a moment he lay still, stunned by the force of the crash. Erica didn't wait for him to recover. She closed the distance in a few swift steps, yanking the spear free from the wreckage as she positioned herself between the biker and his fallen motorcycle. He groaned, rolling onto his side as he tried to push himself up. "Stay down," Erica commanded, her voice sharp and unyielding. The man froze, his bloodshot eyes darting up to meet hers. He saw the fire in her gaze, the unshakable resolve that had carried her through every fight so far. For a brief moment, she thought he might comply. But then his hand shot toward his boot, pulling out a knife with a wickedly curved blade. He lunged at her, his movements clumsy but fueled by raw aggression. Erica sidestepped the attack, the blade slicing through empty air. She brought the spear down hard on his wrist, forcing him to drop the knife with a howl of pain. The weapon clattered to the ground, and she kicked it away, sending it skittering into the underbrush. The man swung his other arm at her, but she caught it mid-strike, using his momentum to twist him around and pin his arm behind his back. He let out a strangled curse, struggling against her grip. "You don't have to do this," Erica said, her voice low but firm. "Walk away. You're already beaten." The biker snarled, his face contorted with rage. "You think this is over?" he spat. "You think you've won?" Erica tightened her grip, applying enough pressure to make him wince. "It's over when I say it's over," she said coldly. "Now leave before I change my mind." She released him with a shove, sending him stumbling forward. He clutched his injured wrist, glaring at her with a mix of hatred and grudging respect. For a moment it seemed as though he might attack again, but the fight had drained out of him. He muttered a string of curses under his breath before limping off into the trees, his defeated form swallowed by the shadows. Erica exhaled sharply, her body relaxing slightly as the immediate threat dissipated. But there was no time to celebrate. She knew there were still others out there, and she had to get back to Jordan. She retrieved the fallen knife, tucking it into her belt alongside her own, and turned to head back the way she had come. The forest seemed eerily quiet now, the tension humming in the air like a living thing. Erica moved quickly but cautiously, her eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. When she reached the stream where she had left Jordan, her heart clenched at the sight of the empty space where he had been hiding. "Jordan," she called out, her voice low but urgent. Panic threatened to take hold, but she forced it down, focusing on the task at hand. "Jordan, it's Mum. Where are you?" A rustling sound came from a nearby thicket, and Erica spun toward it, her hand on her knife. Relief flooded her chest as Jordan emerged, his small frame trembling but unharmed. He ran to her, throwing his arms around her waist. "I stayed hidden, just like you said," he whispered, his voice quivering. Erica knelt down, pulling him into a tight embrace. "You did good, buddy," she said, her voice softening. "You did exactly what you were supposed to." Before she could say more, the distant rumble of engines reached her ears. Her relief was short-lived as she realized the rest of the bikers were regrouping. They weren't done with her yet. Erica straightened, her mind racing. She couldn't keep running, not with Jordan. It was time to end this. She led Jordan deeper into the forest, guiding him to a large hollow tree she had spotted earlier. It was the perfect hiding spot, its interior spacious enough for him to crawl into while remaining completely concealed. "I need you to stay here," she said firmly, crouching down to meet his gaze. "No matter what you hear, you don't come out until I come back for you. Understand?" Jordan nodded, his eyes wide with fear but full of trust. "Be careful, Mum," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I will," Erica promised, placing a hand on his cheek before standing and turning back toward the sound of the approaching engines. She moved with purpose, her steps steady as she prepared for the final confrontation. The bikers thought they had her cornered, but they didn't understand what they were up against. She wasn't running anymore. She was hunting. As the first biker came into view, Erica stepped out of the shadows, her knife gleaming in her hand. The man barely had time to react before she was on him, disarming him with a series of swift, brutal strikes. He went down hard, his motorcycle skidding out from under him as she turned to face the next attacker. One by one they came at her, and one by one she dismantled them, her training and instincts honed to lethal precision. The forest became her battlefield, every tree and rock a weapon in her arsenal. By the time the dust settled, only one figure remained standing: Travis. He approached slowly, his chain swinging ominously at his side. His face was a mask of fury and humiliation, his pride shredded by the carnage she had left in her wake. "You're dead," he growled, his voice low and venomous. "You hear me? Dead?" Erica didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her posture radiating calm, controlled power. "Come on," then she said, her voice steady. "Let's finish this." Travis lunged, the chain whipping through the air like a serpent. Erica ducked, the links brushing past her as she closed the distance. She grabbed the chain, yanking it hard and pulling Travis off balance. He stumbled, and she struck, driving her knife into the ground inches from his head. "Enough," she said, her voice cutting through his rage like a blade. "It's over." Travis stared up at her, his chest heaving. He knew she was right. Slowly, he let the chain fall from his hand, the fight draining out of him. Erica stepped back, keeping her eyes on him as he struggled to his feet. "This isn't the end," he spat, but his words lacked conviction. "It is for you," Erica replied coldly. "Now go." He hesitated, then turned and limped away, disappearing into the trees. Erica stood there for a long moment, her knife still in her hand, before finally lowering it. The forest was silent once more, the battle won. But Erica knew the real victory was waiting for her, the safety of her son. She turned and made her way back to the hollow tree, ready to hold him close and leave this nightmare behind. The forest had fallen into an eerie stillness, the kind that followed chaos. Erica stood for a moment, her breathing heavy, her body aching from the relentless fight. The adrenaline that had carried her through the day was beginning to wane, replaced by a dull throb of exhaustion. Her knife was still in her hand, its blade streaked with dirt and the remnants of bark from deflecting blows. She wiped it clean on her pant leg before sheathing it, her mind already focused on the next and most important task, finding Jordan. She retraced her steps carefully, her senses still heightened despite the calm. The woods around her, once allies, now seemed oppressive in their silence, every shadow a potential threat. Erica knew better than to let her guard down. The bikers were scattered, humiliated and broken, but they weren't dead. Men like Travis didn't forget defeats like this, and while they may have retreated for now, she had no illusions that the matter was truly over. As she neared the hollow tree where she had left Jordan, she called out softly, her voice steady despite the lingering tension. "Jordan, it's me. You can come out now." For a moment, there was no response, and her chest tightened with a surge of panic. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning the base of the tree for any sign of movement. Then, a small figure emerged from the shadows, his face streaked with dirt but unmistakably alive and unharmed. Relief crashed over her like a wave as Jordan ran to her, throwing his arms around her waist. She knelt down and pulled him into a fierce hug, holding him close as if to reassure herself that he was really there. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to stay composed. Jordan nodded against her shoulder, his small hands clutching at her jacket. "I heard the fighting," he said, his voice muffled. I thought you might not come back." Erica pulled back just enough to look him in the eye, her hands resting on his shoulders. "I told you I would," she said firmly. "And I always keep my promises. You were so brave today, Jordan. I'm proud of you." He nodded again, his lip quivering as he tried to hold back tears. Erica gave him a moment, letting him process the fear and relief coursing through him. She knew the weight of the day would linger on him for a long time, but she also knew that his resilience would grow stronger because of it. Finally, he straightened, his eyes shining with a determination that mirrored her own. "What do we do now, Mum?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Erica rose to her feet, extending a hand to him. "Now we get out of here," she said. "Stay close to me. We're going home." Together, they began the trek back through the forest, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the ground. Erica moved with purpose, her body sore but her mind sharp. She had memorized the safest path back to the edge of the park, avoiding the areas where the bikers might regroup. Every step was calculated, her ears attuned to the sounds of the forest around them. Jordan followed her lead without question, his trust in her absolute. As they walked, the weight of the day began to settle over Erica. The brutality of the confrontation, the sheer rawness of the fight for survival, lingered in her mind like a shadow. She had been in battles before, but this one had been different. This time, It wasn't just her life on the line, it was Jordan's. The thought of what could have happened if she had been slower, weaker, or less prepared made her stomach churn, but she forced herself to focus on the present. They were alive, and that was all that mattered. When they finally reached the edge of the forest, Erica felt a sense of relief so profound it nearly brought her to her knees. The sight of her car, parked just beyond the tree line, was like a beacon of safety. She guided Jordan toward it, her eyes still scanning their surroundings for any sign of the bikers. But the area was quiet, the only sound the faint rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. As they climbed into the car, Erica locked the doors and took a moment to collect herself. She glanced at Jordan in the rearview mirror, his small frame slumped in the back seat, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. His head leaned against the window, his eyes half closed but still alert. "Are we safe now?" he asked softly, his voice barely audible. Erica hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "We're safe." The drive back to town was silent, the weight of the day hanging heavily in the air. Erica's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her eyes focused on the road, but her mind replaying every moment of the fight. She had won, but the victory felt hollow. The danger was gone for now, but she knew it wasn't truly over. Men like Travis didn't let things go easily, and she would have to stay vigilant. When they reached their home, Erica ushered Jordan inside, her hand never leaving his shoulder. The familiar comfort of their living room felt like a balm to her frayed nerves, but she couldn't fully relax. She secured the locks on the doors and windows, her eyes scanning the shadows outside for any sign of movement. Only when she was certain that they were alone did she allow herself to breathe. Jordan sat on the couch, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Erica knelt in front of him, her hands resting on his knees. "Are you okay?" she asked again, her voice soft. He nodded slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "Mum, are they going to come back?" Erica hesitated, weighing her words carefully. They might try, she admitted, her honesty a cornerstone of their relationship. "But we'll be ready, and they won't get near you. I promise." Jordan seemed to take comfort in her words, his posture relaxing slightly. He reached out and took her hand, his small fingers curling around hers. "You're the strongest person I know," he said quietly. "I want to be just like you." Erica's chest tightened at his words, a mixture of pride and sadness washing over her. She leaned forward and kissed his forehead, her voice thick with emotion. "You already are," she said. "Braver than you know." That night, after Jordan had fallen asleep, Erica sat alone in the living room, her knife resting on the table in front of her. She stared at it, the memories of the day replaying in her mind. The forest, the bikers, the fight, all of it felt distant now, like a story from another life. But the lessons remained, etched into her like scars. She knew she couldn't change what had happened, but she could prepare for what might come next. Travis and his gang might have been driven off, but they weren't the type to forgive and forget. Erica would have to stay vigilant, not just for herself but for Jordan. She would teach him, guide him, and make sure he never felt powerless in the face of danger. As she sat there, the weight of the day slowly lifting, Erica made a silent promise to herself. She would protect her son at all costs, no matter what it took. And if Travis or anyone else dared to threaten them again, they would learn the hard way that she wasn't someone to be underestimated. The house was quiet, the world outside still and peaceful for now. Erica leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady and unyielding. Whatever came next, she would be ready.